It's the ghost of Settlers of
Yeah,
Seoul.
yeah, I know it. I know it.
Hi, welcome to the Settlers of Seoul podcast. This is Arius Dare. This episode's guest is Joie Reinstein. Joie is a fashion trend forecaster living in Seoul, and to be honest, fashion is one of those things I know very little about. But it's quite apparent for anyone living here, or anyone who's just visited Korea, that fashion is extremely important to a lot of people here. In fact, as you'll hear, Korea is quickly utilizing the fashion world as its own unique form of soft power, along with the usual suspects of pop music and TV programming. I learned a ton here, and Joie could not have been a more gracious and thoughtful guest. Her own story is equally interesting. Really, we could have made a whole nother show based just on Joie's life story. She's lived all over the world, the US, Berlin, Paris, New York. Her mom and dad are what Joie calls global nomads, and they ultimately settled down in Cognac, France. It was there that Joie first got involved in film and took part in several exhibits. The list of people she's met and or worked with is long, including Marilyn Manson of all people. She then moves to New York, studies at Parsons School of Design, before traveling the world as a street photographer, which ultimately lands her a job in the fashion world. She goes back to Europe and creates a Hallyu room for an exhibition at a museum in France, and it was one of the biggest motivators for Joie to come here and settle down in Seoul, where she explores, monitors, observes, and interprets the Seoul fashion scene. So I'm sure you'll find this episode as interesting and educational as I did. And if you do, I encourage you to rate Settlers of Seoul on iTunes and like the Facebook page. The feedback so far has been tremendous. I really, really appreciate it. This is a one-man operation over here, and so any little feedback I get, comments, emails, it really means so much to me. Thank you so much for keeping the show going. Okay, I give you Joie Reinstein.
Hi, Joie. Welcome to the podcast.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Joie, you have a really eclectic background, and I really enjoyed getting to know you for this show. But for the sake of our audience, could you describe what you do here in Korea?
Yeah, I actually often have to explain my job a lot in general because people are always kind of curious or mystified what trend forecasting is and what cultural anthropology is. But I kind of have to hyphenate my job title depending on who the audience is or who the employer is. But basically, I'm a trend forecaster / cultural anthropologist / consumer researcher. So every trend forecaster kind of has their own methodology. I would really say that my job is mainly research. I also use a large amount of intuition in conjunction with that research. So I kind of observe what's going on, let's say in Korea. I'm looking at what people are wearing, what they're eating, what they're watching, what's on the news. Am I seeing things multiple times? Am I seeing things in stores but not on actual people? I basically am trying to be a giant sponge and be as aware as possible of what's going on. I kind of recognize patterns, so I connect the dots. Actually, a really famous futurist, Faith Popcorn, said that if it clicks or pops 3 times, it's a trend. So yeah, if you see 3 examples of something going on, and they can be in completely different places with completely different people, you can still kind of draw the conclusion that something is clearly bubbling up in society. Now, that would be really easy if you just stop there, and that's why I think sometimes people kind of think that my profession, that's all we do, but that's not true. You kind of first get that initial intuition or make that initial observation, but then you really have to back it up with research to prove why. Where did it come from? Why does it exist? Where is it going? And, some people specialize in more short-term predictions. I kind of tend to focus on the macro. I try to look at more like a 5-year time frame. How this translates into actual work is that in Korea, I'll often get contacted by foreign companies who really want to know what's going on in a specific market. It's a lot of field research. It's a lot of ethnographic research, interviewing. It actually, the backside of it is quite geeky, I always say. People think it sounds way more exciting. I mean, it is a great and exciting job because you're always learning new things. But yeah, it definitely has a very large research component.
So I understand you have professional work experience in New York, in France, in Germany. What or how would you describe the Korean fashion market, or let's say fashion in Korea? I mean, I think that you can look on YouTube and find lots of different clips and videos, dramas and these things like that. But how would you describe that? What words do you use to describe modern Korean fashion?
Modern Korean fashion is very bold, definitely very innovative. I think it's only recently kind of really come into its own. I think when it comes to the fashion designers that you see at Seoul Fashion Week, that before they were kind of trying to play it safe. Like they didn't want to disrupt the market too much. They wanted to kind of follow what the general trends were in Korea. And, obviously to them, selling was the most important thing, which is understandable for a fashion brand and its longevity. It's only kind of in the last season, I would even say, that I see a lot of risk taking. And I feel that it's no longer trying to so much emulate maybe something that was in a Prada show, but it's really trying to be like, yes, we are a Korean designer, we have our own aesthetic, and we're proud of it. And I think this is super exciting because it is at the beginning of this, and it's just going to continue to evolve and become more important. And I truly believe that in a few years that Seoul Fashion Week will have just as much its place alongside New York Fashion Week, Paris Fashion Week, and London Fashion Week.
So you've had an opportunity to kind of watch the Korean fashion world kind of from an outside looking in, and then obviously living here now, you get a much more intimate kind of feel for it. In what ways has it changed over the last half decade?
I mean, Korea has this incredible ability to evolve so fast. I think that's what really maybe attracts me most even about this country is it just can change on a dime. And, when you hear stories about like how in the 1980s they didn't even have electricity in a lot of towns, and then you look at it now and it's just unbelievable what South Koreans are capable and how they're always trying to push the envelope themselves. So I think that it's almost like between when I came here in 2012 and now, it's like things are at hyperspeed compared to other countries. The first time I came, I still remember it wasn't that fashionable. I mean, there was like kind of some pockets maybe, but the general public...
Are you saying sparkly pink ajashi ties are not fashionable?
Where did you even see that?
Oh, have you not seen the sparkly ajashi ties?
No.
Oh man, you got to go to Jongno sometime.
I need to look out for that one. Yeah, maybe that, you never know, it could catch on. No, the first time I came here, I just remember sitting in the subway and every single young person was wearing New Balance sneakers, and it was very homogenous and even, dare I say, a little bit normcore before that was even a term. And I was actually a little bit disappointed, I remember, even the first time I came here, because of K-pop videos, I was expecting something far more flashy, far more eccentric, and maybe something that was a little bit more...
Everybody's not a perfect 10. What is going on?
But I mean, I just, again, it just shows like the power of their pop culture that like, the disconnect between what was actually still going on here in 2012 and then what was being shown on like Big Bang videos, for example.
So what do you think has changed then? I mean, you still see, really glitzy, well-produced K-pop videos, but you're saying that the way that people now dress is much more bold. What is going on? Is it cheaper? Is it more culturally acceptable to dress more edgy? What changed?
Well, again, going back to the fact that people here just seem to evolve at this faster pace than the rest of the world, I think that they, because of internet culture, because of YouTube, because of also the fact that a lot of young people in Korea themselves are traveling more, are studying abroad more, they're kind of bringing in this mixity and this exposure back to their country. It's confidence too. Hallyu really kind of boosted the morale, I would say, of Korea in terms of who they were as a nation, in terms of their place in the world and their identity. And I think that they just started taking bolder moves and realizing, yeah, we are good creators. We do produce really interesting things. Let's keep going with this. So now, like when you walk around Hongdae or Gangnam, or actually really any given area of Seoul or Busan or wherever in Korea, you see just an amazing amount of well-dressed people. I think it's really impressive.
Well, for somebody who hasn't visited Korea and maybe they've only seen it on TV, could you describe what an average young Korean woman, say 25 years old, would be wearing? Let's say outside the office, right? You're going out on the town. What would you be wearing?
It depends on the season.
Well, the season is summer, so it's pretty hot outside.
So like in every country, there are the fashionistas and fashionistas that, really step it up. And then there's just the general population who's just, dressing for their daily life. But I do want to, again, emphasize the fact that the bar is set very high in Korea in terms of aesthetics. Like, people here just seem to know how to put an outfit together, men and women, and it's even kind of shameful to go out looking like a slob. There is no slob culture in Korea. If you walk out of your house wearing sweatpants, like, people will think that something's wrong with you. So it is, though, really refreshing to kind of see everybody, like just the general population, have such a nice sense of style.
Are there any other kind of defining characteristics about fashion here, either the way women dress or men as well? Like, for example, if you were to see an outfit or you to see a particular group of people, aside from, how their faces look, could you look at their outfits and say, oh, that's definitely Korean?
I would say that it's usually actually the makeup that's a dead giveaway more than the fashion. I can always recognize Korean people abroad just even by their lipstick and how they applied it.
Which is how?
The Koreans love like what they call a gradient lip. It's a trend that even many makeup companies tried to market abroad and even created special formulas just for that purpose. But if for some reason it never took off. And I think it also has a lot to do, again, with morphology. Like Korean women are often blessed with these really beautiful full lips. And so basically gradient is where you don't bring your lipstick to the very edge of your lips. It just kind of sits in the center of it. It's pretty much the opposite of what Kylie Jenner is doing. So not just even the lips, though. like beauty, there's a very specific definition of kind of what Korean beauty and Korean makeup is. And it has a very specific application. Usually the eyebrows are very straight across. They're not arched. There's no contouring. So the face is kept quite natural. They like that dewy finish, gwang, which they call, which now actually is kind of catching on abroad too. But most of the time in the past, Westerners always wanted a matte finished face. This sort of like dewy, youthful Korean look is like spreading around the world. So it's definitely a very distinctive way of wearing makeup, and you now do see its influence in other countries as well. But obviously, Korean women have mastered it, and so that's why it's just really easy to spot them.
Now, I think for me, the layman, when it comes to fashion, to be sure, I kind of see that Koreans dress really similar. Is this driven by what they see on TV, on YouTube? What are some of the fashion drivers in this society?
One of the main things is definitely their society. Korea is a very communal country. Things are always done in groups. It's very rare that you see Koreans just hanging out by themselves. And actually, that was even sort of taboo a few years ago. Now it's become a little bit more accepted because of shifting cultural norms. But, it's a very gregarious culture, and people tend to try to do things and function with the group. Actually, I've even heard that for makeup, it is considered a courtesy to others to have a nice face. It's not something that you do for yourself. This very group culture they have here, I think that sometimes when it comes to fashion, people are afraid to stand out too much. This is, though, shifting now because there does seem to be a rise in the desire for individuality, but it's really kind of also at its first stages. Because of declining birth rates and sort of these massive cultural shifts in society, such as people getting married at much later ages or not even wanting to get married at all, the tough job market, like not making enough money to even provide for a family, etc., studies have shown that there's been a rise in what they call YOLO culture, which is actually an American expression, you only live once, but they're actually using it in Korea to describe this phenomenon. They say that now the majority of households are actually single-family households, which is kind of almost unheard of in Korea because, it was always very much the family unit. And again, people doing things collectively or with their family, but now you see these people that are, for various reasons, living by themselves, and they're now spending their discretional income on more enjoyment, experience, pleasure-based things than necessities, so to speak.
You mentioned now a few times the difference between individual and collectivism. Does that manifest itself differently in how people dress? And if so, what would be some differences that you see as Korea transitions into a more Western or individual type of society? Of course, not to the degree that the U.S. or France is, to be sure, but certainly adopting much more individualistic patterns than at any time before.
So I think it comes twofold. It can relate to the actual market and then to trends themselves. In terms of the market, it's really important because young people are spending more money on things for their own enjoyment and also for their own image, whether that be grooming or fashion. And that applies both to men and women. I mean, there's been many studies too showing that the men's fashion and cosmetic industry has exploded in Korea. There's definitely going to be an increased amount of spending on those sectors, which Korea should definitely take note of, and I'm sure they have. In terms of trends, it becomes really apparent when you go to Seoul Fashion Week. And I'm not talking this time about the actual fashion shows. I'm talking about the attendees or the people that gather at the Dongdaemun Design Plaza. And actually, a lot of these people aren't even going to the shows. They're what I would call fashion fans. Like, they just are people that love fashion, and that's like their hobby. And actually, in Korean, they have a really cute word for them. They call them pepi, which means fashion people. And because there's no F in Korean, they say passion people, so that's why the short version pepi. So there's a lot of pepi that come to Seoul Fashion Week, and one of the interesting things that I've noticed there when I talk to people is that a lot of them don't work in fashion, don't even work in a creative field, but are just really passionate about it. When I was doing street style in the West, and if I spoke to one of the people that I photographed who had like a particularly cool outfit, 90% of the time they actually worked in the fashion industry, or maybe they were an artist, or they worked in the creative field. So it really is kind of surprising in Korea to see some guy wearing some amazing, colorful, bold outfit, and then he tells you that he's like an engineer or something. So I think that it's really promising to see that people are taking interest in this, like, again, as a hobby. The other thing is that the amount of risk-taking going on with these people at Seoul Fashion Week is just phenomenal. It's so inspiring. Like, I've been to 3 seasons now, and every time I do street style, I am just blown away about what these people come up with. And what's also great is the fact that they're making these outfits out of things that they just find in cheap stores around Seoul and the subway in Dongdaemun itself, or they're even kind of hacking their clothes, cutting them up, juxtaposing different things together. So there's just a tremendous amount of creativity going on. And what I think has shifted in these past few years is this willingness to assert one's personality through their fashion and to stand out from the crowd. And not only are they standing out from the crowd in Korea, but these people are standing out from the crowd in the whole world. And this is why now they've also caught the attention of other countries too, and why so many people want to see what's going on at Seoul Fashion Week.
So aside from Seoul Fashion Week, what other places in the city or what other events do you go to that you think are just cannot miss for fashion forecasting? Fashion trend forecasting. So
my 2 favorite areas to kind of take the pulse of what the general fashion that's going on in Seoul is Gil, which is in Gangnam, or in the Gangnam area. It's by Shinsa Station. And it's basically like a main street and then two parallel streets, and it is literally a street-style catwalk, I would say. You can go there pretty much any day of the week, and you will see tons of people wearing incredible outfits. And not just from Korea, you also even have tourists, like I would say fashion tourists, like people that are attracted there for that very purpose, because they want to check out, like, you know, the latest like beauty and fashion trends in Korea. The other area is definitely Hongdae. Hongdae has always kind of been a sort of inspiration staple, I would say, for a lot of people. I mean, even people that don't live here and come to shoot some street style, et cetera, they'll definitely go to Hongdae, which is the, you know, one of the main university areas of Seoul. There's this one street that I like to go to in particular. I don't know why. Like, it's always funny that, like, in every city, there always seems to be, like, the street style street. I don't know why. Maybe it's because of, like, the backdrop. Like, it's actually a street that's, like, right next to the park, so it has, like, a really good wall. You're always looking for a good wall when you're a street style photographer, so you can, you know, put that person with a nice neutral backdrop. I would say that, though, the difference between Hongdae and Gil is that Hongdae is definitely a younger crowd, like the average age probably like early 20s.
It's a little bit of a college town.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely veering towards the younger side. It's definitely, I would say, more cute in terms of like a lot of the fashion you see there, in terms of women at least. Whereas Gil is a little bit more like higher end or like high fashion. And so you see people that really have made an effort, like in terms of like the outfits they have put together. Whereas Hongdae, it's more kind of like just the accidental amazingness of maybe what a Korean student wore that day.
Walk us through, say, the four seasons, let's say the last four seasons that you've seen in Korea, some of the defining trends that you have identified. So we're with summer now, right? So why don't we start with summer and then backtrack to spring, winter, and last fall?
Like this season, well, actually, it kind of started already in the spring too, but it's carrying over now, which is shorter lengths. Is like denim is super popular here. Like, yeah, like everybody has denim everything, whether it's shorts, a skirt, overalls, a jacket, a shirt, like in every shape and form. But what's really cool about it is that it's super shredded. Like, there's no hems on anything. Like, it's just right now, it's like not very cool to have a hem. Like, it needs to like have strings hanging off of it. There needs to be holes in it. And actually at the last Seoul Fashion Week, which was in March, you know, I saw some girls wearing skirts where it like literally looked like their dog had attacked it, like for lack of a better way of explaining it. Like there was like huge chunks out of it and like a flap of fabric just sort of hanging there. And then they'd wear that over fishnets. And that's actually a huge thing, that I don't know if Korea started it, but it definitely became popularized here. It's wearing fishnets, like big black fishnets underneath denim with holes in it. That, because of Korean street style, I would say became a worldwide trend because people just thought it looked so cool. And same thing, I saw a girl once at Seoul Fashion Week where she literally cut off one leg even of her jeans. So it was like a half short, half pant with the fishnets underneath it. So it's just that level of like DIY that I really love. Another thing that's really big here is the uneven trend or unbalanced trend. I think they have different ways of saying it. It's where like your garment has two lengths. So for example, I bought this sweatshirt that I would say 3/4 of it is like thigh length, and then 1/4 of the hem is almost like crop top length. So it's like, and sometimes we'll even...
This sounds bizarre.
Yeah, it's really, on paper, it just doesn't sound right at all. And even when you first see it, you might even think it's a bit weird, but then you kind of realize it's just like a really very avant-garde, cool looking way of wearing things and of making fashion. Yeah, I remember I was in Europe not that long ago, and I brought back that top that I was just talking about, and you know, a few people were like, what is this weird thing? And I'm like, you'll see, and a year from now, you'll all be wearing this uneven trend. One of the trends that I observed and that I've seen confirmed and then even kind of evolve since moving to Korea is something that I called originally rebels with a cause. And I had done a report for a company on this. It kind of ties into, the individuality thing. It also is about like kind of young Koreans more affirming their differences, affirming the fact that they don't always agree, and kind of rebelling or beginning to rebel against certain Korean cultural norms. A good example of this is tattoos. Tattoos or running a tattoo salon is still technically illegal in Korea. That doesn't mean to say that doesn't happen. There are actually some very, very talented tattoo artists in this country that you can find on Instagram. But a few years ago, tattoos were considered very, very taboo here, and they had a lot of negative connotations, and people would never dare show anything like that. It was actually, I believe, Jay Park, who's a Korean hip-hop artist, has like a full sleeve of tattoos, and I think even on his chest, that he was kind of one of the first people to really bring it to the forefront and sort of take some of the demonization out of it. But even so, I remember even watching an interview where he said that sometimes when he would do performances on TV here for like some of the main stations, they would make him wear long sleeve shirts to cover up his tattoos. We've now seen this shift where people are starting to do things such as wear tattoos, such as wear ripped clothing, to wear outfits that express their individuality and their personality. And this has continued to evolve. And I think what's most notable is the influence of the situation with the former president, Park Geun-hye. This really had a tremendous influence on young people as well as the creative industry and how people express themselves, etc. What really represented the change at Seoul Fashion Week in terms of what the designers were doing before and now is they would have been designing the collection that was shown this past March during the whole Park Geun-hye trials and also during that whole protest period. In their own Korean way, which is amazing, so much of the country became rebels, so to speak. They really stood up for their cause. And I think it's so admirable the way they went about it, their diligence, their collective spirit of just trying to get something done for their country that was super important. This just had this had such a big effect on the zeitgeist of Korea. So meanwhile, all these designers, they were designing their collection during this period. Clearly it had an influence on what they were making and the statement they wanted to make when they showed it. Because at this past Fashion Week, almost every show I went to opened up with like these very political images, like showing videos of protests, not of Korea, but like even of other countries, but more as like sort of metaphoric, symbolic ways of expressing maybe their discontent or the changes they'd gone through. Even one of the designers, Archimiste, was showing like an LGBT protest, I think in Poland. So this was definitely a massive sea change to kind of assert their position on certain societal issues. And so basically all these shows, they would open up with this incredible imagery that really kind of took a very strong political position. And then the collections themselves, not only did they also assert their individuality as Korean designers, a trend that really ran through this past season was what I like to call post-rebellion. So obviously you had the rebellion period and now you have post-rebellion because they managed to kick out the bad president, right? So the aesthetic of post-rebellion is almost like this disheveled, post-apocalyptic kind of look. It's almost like somebody was at a protest, maybe got in a bit of a fight or a jumble or something, slept in their clothing all night, and then the next morning they kind of just put everything on in a sort of mishmash way and maybe not even the right part of their body, and that's how it came out. And this was really prevalent in a lot of the collections. And it was just such a unique look that I haven't seen any other designer do, even in the rest of the world. And so this shift that happened, or this shift that's happening, now they are kind of creating things that are a little bit more inherently Korean, that maybe just reference a bit other inspirations, places, people, etc., but that are definitely affirming their own aesthetic. I'd like to mention I actually know the people there, and I think they're just incredibly creative and talented. But the people at Rocket Lunch, or it's actually written Rocket X Lunch, I mean, the stuff that they make is just really, to me, when I look at it, is just so profoundly Korean in the best sense of the term.
Now, is Rocket Lunch a small company, a startup company, or are they subsidized or funded by one of the big chaebol? I guess what I'm getting at is that so much of the private sector here is dominated by the big guys. And so I'm wondering if that also bleeds into the fashion industry.
I'm pretty sure Rocket Lunch is an individually owned company. It was actually founded by a couple. They met in school, and the husband is more of like the creative director, and the wife does a lot of kind of like the production and distribution, but she also still creates as well. And they have a very small team right by Dongdaemun, and I think they are able to do what they do because they aren't being dictated by like a bigger company that's basically just telling them, this is the bottom line and you need to sell so many units, and that's what's most important.
Well, do you think that the chaebol or these other big players, do you think that they are influential in the fashion game at all?
They're influential in the market in terms of pushing product, but they're not influential creatively. In fact, I would say they would be able to stifle it. One of the things that I guess still surprises me in Korea is sort of the sometimes lack of celebration of creativity. The chaebol and this drive to always, meet the bottom line, to make money, etc., really does stifle out creativity in a lot of different ways. And again, even the societal pressure of like parents, schools, etc., saying like, in order to succeed, you need to go work at Samsung, etc. I mean, no shade whatsoever to people who want to go work at Samsung. That's great. But I do think there's a lot of people out there that really would love to have a more creative job. Those jobs are actually celebrated in places like New York or Paris, etc. But here, they're still kind of considered second rate or not as good. Like parents would think even sometimes that their kid is more of a failure because they're going into a creative field. And I just find this really surprising for a country that pretty much put itself on the map because of creative endeavors, not technological ones. Like, yes, of course, we do recognize Korea for companies like Samsung and LG, et cetera. But what captured the attention of the younger audience around the world wasn't a television. It was, Hallyu. So this is why I hope going into the future that there will be more small and medium-sized companies. Like people will accept the fact that working in a creative field is just as noble of work as being a wesawan.
So I'm glad you brought up Hallyu, and I think that is for most people their only exposure to what Korean fashion is. So compared to maybe 5-10 years ago, do you think that we've kind of entered into a new phase of Hallyu? And if so, what would that look like? And would that be different than what the common or conventional wisdom of what this Hallyu or Korean wave is?
Hallyu has definitely evolved, and I hope that you won't get hate mail because of me saying this, but I think that...
Well, I wish that many people listen to the show.
I don't know if there's Korea boos out there listening to your show. You never know. They're everywhere. But, K-pop was instrumental in terms of putting Korea, South Korea, and Hallyu on the map, for sure. And that's even how I, got interested in it. So no, I'm not downplaying the importance of K-pop whatsoever. The real Hallyu major player, I would say, is definitely the beauty industry. Korean cosmetics have become like the most in-demand cosmetics in the world. There is just a tremendous amount of both curiosity as well as trust now. And that's actually the most important thing when it comes to cosmetics, because it's something that you're applying to your skin and your body. You need to have trust. And people are more aware now of the benefits of Korean beauty, initially from things like K-pop and K-dramas, but then also magazines and just beauty influencers, YouTube, etc., demonstrating the virtues of these products. And it's also because the innovation level in this country is just bar none. I mean, it's to the point that most major cosmetic brands, both from the United States, Japan, France, take their inspiration from Korean cosmetics. Like, I've just seen some blatant copying even of certain products. One of the best examples is the BB cream compact, or cushion as they call it. First there was BB cream, which was something that was invented by Korea, which means like beauty balm. And it's sort of a multitasking formula that has SPF in it. It usually also has anti-aging benefits, maybe like brightening or smoothing. And then it also has coverage, like a bit of a light foundation. And this was such a new concept because before all those things were separate elements. And then they took it one step further and they made the cushion compact, which just revolutionized the way of even applying a product like that, because you have like a little portable compact and you have this kind of like puff thing, and then you have what's kind of like what they call the cushion, which is like either a sponge or like a mesh kind of bouncy insert that contains the product. And then you just kind of lightly apply it to your face. And everybody who tries it the first time, they're always like, wow, this is so different than anything I ever used in the past. Like, I used to hate foundation because it was just like wearing a mask, blah, blah, blah. And so they really changed the whole makeup game even. And now it's to the point that even the French themselves, who are, pretty much considered the leaders of beauty in the world, that they even recognize South Korea as being pretty much the biggest innovator when it comes to new products and new formulas. It was actually at a conference that I went to at this trade show called Makeup in Asia that had their Seoul edition last April. There was kind of the major manufacturers and people representing the beauty world there. And yeah, a French woman said, we now regard South Korea as our biggest competitor. So I think that's a pretty big deal when a French person acknowledges that fact. That takes a lot, and it really just demonstrates now the power of this market, and that it's not a fad. It's not just something that's, a special in Sephora, but it's something that is here to stay. And I really think will continue to grow, and be a major component of Hallyu. And not only that, but the South Korean government as well recognizes it as one of the largest growing sectors of Korean exports.
I'll make a lateral move here. What do you think is the biggest misperception about fashion here that you receive from some of your Western clients that are looking to forecast or predict what's going to be the next hot thing?
In a very esoteric way, I've seen in a lot of trend reports for Western markets and companies is, this whole thing of like, let's be communal and let's do group activities, etc. For very, especially for the United States in a very individualistic society, that is a new concept. But here it's the opposite, like doing things by yourself is the new thing. I think that sometimes Western companies, they have a little bit of a one-size-fits-all kind of mentality, or they aren't even aware sometimes of how different it can be. And even these subtle cultural nuances of what's not accepted or what's, taboo, et cetera, they just take a lot of those things for granted. So sometimes I kind of have to almost act like this cultural translator to be like, no, you can't really do this in Korea. If you want to sell to Korean people, this is kind of the mindset you have to have, et cetera.
Could you give an example of a time that you've done that?
Going back to that study I did on hair care, that was really fascinating because they actually sent somebody out to do research with me. And this was even surprising to me, too. I mean, I'm obviously learning things all the time. We were both mystified by the fact that when you go into a big Korean supermarket and you go to the shampoo aisle, there's like these massive bottles of shampoo. They're like a gallon of shampoo. And it's like, who would need a gallon of shampoo? That's crazy. And they're pretty cheap even. So you're kind of a little bit like, why, is this even any good? Why would I want to buy that? And then on the flip side, there seems to be a lack of like really specialty hair care products, like things that are, a little bit more luxurious or a little like for more specific needs. Like even if you go to an Olive Young, which is like a drugstore kind of setting, there's really not that much on offer. And when we spoke to one of the hairstylists, she told us that because in the past, because of the more communal society of Korea, that a family would buy one bottle of shampoo for the whole family. It was like they just had one bottle to suit everybody, regardless of their hair type.
All right, Joey, it's everybody's favorite part of the Settlers of Seoul podcast, the rapid fire round. So this first question that I have for you, what traits have you personally seen in Korean young people, both male and female, that you really enjoy, that you respect, and that you wish you could see more of in your American or French or, non-Korean counterparts?
Good question. Actually, I think it goes back to why I really fell in love with Korea, like for real reasons, like why I wanted to live here, not because of what I saw on a screen, but, what I encountered with people. And in Korea, they call it jon, which is like, it doesn't really have quite an equivalent in English, but it's kind of like affection, and warmth. I think that, Koreans are they can be some of the most warm-hearted, wonderful people that, sometimes I've found myself in situations like one time I got sick in a Buddhist temple in the middle of the mountains, and the people there just went above and beyond taking care of me, like as if they were my own parents. And it was so moving. I was crying when I left because, as someone who has traveled around a lot and lived in a lot of different cities and places, like I had never experienced that kind of kindness that was really sincere, like not to that degree or whatever. And that's the nice part that stems from being a more communal society of this whole thing of people calling each other 언니 and 오빠, et cetera, like, older brother, older sister. Like, it's really this sort of more concern and regard for the other person, which I really appreciate. I truly think that is sometimes missing in Western society. Like we've gone too far the other way and we need to bring that back.
The world needs more Jong.
Yeah, I think for sure. The world would definitely be a better place if there was more Jong.
What's dating like in Korea as a white woman?
I have given up dating, unfortunately. I had high hopes when I came here. I think that Korean men, a lot of them are very attractive, and I really had hopes to meet a Korean man, even for a significant relationship. But it's just the way the culture is built and the cultural differences are sometimes just too hard. Like most Korean people meet each other through sogeting, where it's basically a blind date where their friends or family or people they know have set them up with somebody else. And so there's a large amount of accountability for one. And that's just pretty much the cultural norm. Whereas when you're a foreigner, usually when you come here, you don't really have the opportunity to do sogeting. Like you're going to be using dating apps, and just like in any country, often on dating apps, the people that end up there are not always the best choice. I don't know. I just feel like I just had a long series of really bad dates. And also not only that, of just even feeling disrespected as a woman. There are douchebags all over the world. I'm not going to say that dating culture in New York is wonderful either. It's a pretty brutal place as well. But I think that on top of that, being a foreign woman in Seoul is just really difficult. You know, there's certain stereotypes and connotations and things that you kind of have to fight against and defy almost, you know, because they expect certain things of you being a foreign woman. And that's just really, it's kind of soul crushing after a while. And that's kind of why I gave up in the end, because I just didn't want both that negativity in my life and also I didn't want it to completely sort of overtake the good feelings that I had about Korean people. You know, I was like, let's just stop here while I'm ahead.
What would you do with a jar of kimchi if you could not eat it?
If I could not eat it? Wow. I mean, what a funny question. Well, you know, kimchi, if you leave it a really long time, it almost gets this like soda-like quality. It starts to bubble. You might be able to use it to scour something with, almost like baking soda. Like, then again, your shower would be pretty stinky afterwards. But no, kimchi's too good to be wasted, though. Why would you want to do that with it?
If you could remove one thing from Korea, what would it be?
Well, I think people would notice, but in a good way, if I could remove the stinky sewer system. Oh my gosh. And now that it's summer, wow. It's just like if it rains, it just smells so bad sometimes. And it's not even just in the street, it's even in your house. Like the struggle is real. Like my sink, even everything. Like I'm just amazed how much time I spend like cleaning and maintaining my sink and not having it smell. Cause like they just have a very weird plumbing system here that I've never seen before. And so, yeah, that would be great if we could remove that.
What do you think, and maybe this is exclusive information, but what do you see on the horizon for Korean fashion? And, you know, whether or not that's going to take off internationally is beside the point, but just where do you see it going in the next month, year, 10 years?
Well, I'm really excited to see what happens at the next Seoul Fashion Week, which will be in October, because of kind of the significant change we witnessed at the last season. I want to see if they continue to kind of, you know, carry on this risk-taking and this assertiveness. I believe they will. I also think that Korean fashion wants kind of responsible growth. Yeah, so I think this is an indicator of why designers are independent from chaebol. They kind of want to build their brand out in a more slow and responsible way. Like, you know, they're using social media, they're using influencers, which really is the way to go these days. You know, like traditional marketing has kind of gone by the wayside. And, you know, now it's like Instagram and YouTube that are the primary drivers of trends, especially when it comes to the youth demographic. Again, a brand like Rocket Lunch, they don't want all of a sudden just be this massive brand tomorrow. They don't want to be like Chanel and like every department store in the world, but they want to make sure that they can find the right clients that'll appreciate them around the world. And if that means just selling a few pieces in select shops here and there for now, and then continue to grow and continue their online presence and their store, et cetera, then that's kind of like the way that a lot of these companies are going. I truly have faith, just because of what I've witnessed over the past few years, that they will come into their own fully, and that, you know, people, not just fashion editors who already have recognized Korean fashion, but also a more general fashion loving public as well, will see them as an equivalent in terms of quality and design to Parisian fashion, New York fashion, or London fashion.
All right, last question. If somebody were interested in trend forecasting, what would be a good entry-level job for them, or how would they be able to break into the industry?
Trend forecasting is kind of a funny beast. It is a very, as I mentioned, it's not a very well-known profession. There aren't even that many people doing it. I pretty much know or know someone who knows everybody else in the trend forecasting world. It's definitely a skill. It's being able to, you know, hone your intuition, like listen to your intuition, which is like a very strange concept to some people because it's not listening to your brain and it's not listening to your heart, but it's listening to your gut, if that makes sense. Like, really that you're feeling something is going to happen. And also, again, it's also the ability to be super open-minded and super aware of a lot of moving parts and things that are going on. So you kind of already have to have that. I don't think you necessarily have to even go to school for that. I think, doing an internship at either a fashion brand, like in-house, or working for a trend forecasting agency, is the best way to just really dive into it and kind of even see what sector, because, there are many even different angles of trend forecasting. You could be doing it in lifestyle and interiors and technology, et cetera. So kind of what is your area of focus?
Joie Reinstein, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm actually a big fan of the Settlers of Seoul podcast, so it's
Thank
really...
you so much. I appreciate that.
It's exciting to actually be on the other side.
Our one fan is now sitting here in front of me. That's great.
My dad is also listening. He's like your other big fan.
2, yes. Great to hear. All right. Thank you so much.